when the unmarked black SUV pulled into my driveway at 4 a.m. I knew my life was about to take a turn. They didn't knock. They never do. A tall man in a charcoal suit stepped out, his face obscured by the shadows. "Agent Larkin," he said, flashing a badge that practically screamed classified. "We need you, now." I wasn't surprised. You don't leave 15 years in Delta Force behind without the government keeping tabs on you. Since retiring, I'd been living a quiet life in Montana, running a survival training program for outdoor enthusiasts. It wasn't glamorous, but it kept me sane. The adrenaline rush of covert ops had been replaced with teaching greenhorns how not to get eaten by a bear. It wasn't the worst trade-off, but it was a far cry from storming compounds in the middle of the night. I didn't respond immediately. Instead, I leaned on the doorframe and crossed my arms. "What's the job?" I asked, my voice flat. The man stepped closer, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "We have a situation in Glacier National Park. Multiple fatalities. Park rangers, hikers, locals." He hesitated. "Whatever's doing this, it's not human." I almost laughed. Almost. "You're telling me Bigfoot's on the loose?" "Not Bigfoot." His tone was ice cold. "Something worse. Something we've encountered before. Your file says you've dealt with unconventional threats. This is as unconventional as it gets." I felt a chill creep down my spine, but I kept my expression neutral. "And you're hiring me because this isn't a standard military operation," he said. "We need someone who can adapt, someone who can think beyond what's in the manual. You've got the skills, the training, and you've seen things most people wouldn't believe." He wasn't wrong. My final mission with Delta had involved a target whose unorthodox nature still gave me nightmares. I didn't ask questions back then. Now, I wasn't so sure I wanted to know. "Time frame?" I asked, already knowing the answer. "We leave now," he said, gesturing toward the SUV. I nodded and grabbed my go-bag from the closet. A habit I'd never quite broken. Within minutes, I was in the back seat, the dark Montana landscape blurring past as we sped toward the airport. The air was heavy with anticipation, the kind that made your skin crawl. "Agent Larkin," the man said after a long silence. "What do you know about Dogman?" I frowned. "Nothing. Should I?" His lips curled into a thin, humorless smile. "You're about to find out." The C-130 cargo plane touched down on a makeshift airstrip hidden deep in the wilderness of Glacier National Park. As we stepped out into the frigid pre-dawn air, the scene before me was eerily surreal. Black-clad operatives moved like shadows, unloading crates of advanced weaponry and equipment. It was a full-blown military operation, and yet it had the hush of something that didn't officially exist. "Welcome to the staging area," said the man from earlier. "Agent Donovan, as I'd learned during the flight. This is where the hunt begins." The word hunt lingered in my mind as I scanned the faces of the assembled team. They weren't your average grunts. These were the kind of people who didn't flinch at the unthinkable. Among them, I recognized a few familiar types. A demolitions expert by the way she handled the C4, a sniper meticulously calibrating his scope, and a tracker studying a map with the intensity of a chess grandmaster. "What's the brief?" I asked, breaking the silence. Donovan motioned for me to follow him into a large tent. Inside, a digital map of the park flickered on a portable screen. Red dots marked areas where bodies had been found. Too many for comfort. "We've had 11 confirmed deaths in the last 6 weeks, Donovan began. All victims were either mauled or partially eaten. Local authorities thought it was a bear at first, but the autopsies, they told a different story. I raised an eyebrow. "What kind of story?" He tapped a button, and a series of crime scene photos appeared. The images weren't for the faint of heart. Mangled corpses, claw marks that could have split a tree in half, and bite patterns that didn't match any known animal. "Whatever did this walks on 2 legs, Donovan said grimly. "It's fast, it's strong, and it's smart. Too smart." "And you're sure it's not just some psychopath in a fursuit?" I asked, trying to keep my tone light despite the knot forming in my stomach. Donovan didn't laugh. "This thing isn't human," he said flatly. "It's been spotted by survivors. Those who were lucky enough to make it out alive. They described something, canine. 7 to 8 feet tall, yellow eyes, and claws that could shred Kevlar." I stared at the map, my mind racing. I'd faced monsters of the human variety before, but this was something else entirely. What's the objective? Simple, Donovan said, though his tone suggested otherwise. We track it, we kill it, and we bring back proof that it's dead. No witnesses, no leaks. This operation never happened. Proof? I asked. He nodded. The higher-ups want DNA. Something tangible. They don't just want the problem gone, they want to study it. I clenched my fists. This wasn't just a kill mission, it was a retrieval. That complicated things. And if we fail, Donovan's gaze hardened. Failure isn't an option. This thing is a predator. If we don't stop it, more people will die. And if the public finds out, he let the sentence hang, the implications clear. I looked at the map again, noting the dense forest and steep terrain. This wasn't going to be easy. But then, the missions worth doing never were. All right, I said finally. Let's get to work. The hunt began at dawn. The team split into 2 units, each armed to the teeth with enough firepower to take down a small army. I was paired with Marcus, a burly tracker with a thick beard and an even thicker southern drawl. He moved through the forest like he was born in it, his steps silent despite the heavy pack he carried. Keep your eyes open, Marcus muttered, crouching to examine a faint trail of footprints in the soft earth. This thing doesn't like to leave much behind, but it's sloppy when it's on the move. I crouched beside him, studying the tracks. They were massive, bipedal with clawed toes that dug deep into the soil. The sheer size made my skin crawl. These fresh? I asked. Couple hours, maybe less, Marcus replied, his tone grim. It's close. The forest around us felt alive, but not in the usual way. Birds and small animals were conspicuously absent, leaving an eerie silence that pressed down on us like a weight. Every snapping twig, every rustle of leaves had my finger hovering over the trigger of my rifle. We moved carefully, following the trail deeper into the woods. As we crested a ridge, Marcus raised a fist, signaling me to stop. You smell that? He asked in a low whisper. I sniffed the air and immediately recoiled. The stench was overpowering. Rotting meat mixed with wet fur and something acrid like sulfur. Yeah, I said, my voice barely audible. What is it? Marcus didn't answer. Instead, he pointed ahead to a clearing where the trees thinned out. At first, I didn't see anything, but then my eyes locked onto a shape in the shadows. It was hunched over, its back to us, and it was feeding. My stomach turned as I realized what it was eating. A deer, or what was left of it. The creature was massive, its matted fur rippling over muscles that didn't belong on any animal I'd ever seen. Its head resembled a wolf's, but there was an unnatural intelligence in its movements, a calculated precision as it tore flesh from bone. I raised my rifle, my hands steady despite the adrenaline surging through me. We've got eyes on it, I whispered into my comms. Donovan's voice crackled in my earpiece. Hold your position. Do not engage until we've got the second unit in place. Copy that, I replied, though every instinct screamed at me to act. Marcus tapped my shoulder and pointed to the creature's legs. Look at those, he murmured. The claws on its feet were nearly as long as my forearm, and its stance was unnervingly human-like. It wasn't just a predator. It was a hunter. Suddenly, the creature's head snapped up, and its yellow eyes locked onto us. My breath caught as it rose to its full height, towering over the deer carcass like a nightmare brought to life. Move, Marcus shouted, and we scrambled for cover as the beast let out an ear-splitting roar. The sound wasn't just loud. It was disorienting, a guttural mix of growl and scream that shook me to my core. Gunfire erupted as Marcus opened fire, his shots striking the creature but barely slowing it down. It moved with terrifying speed, closing the distance between us in seconds. I fired a burst, aiming for its center mass, but it barely flinched. Fall back, I yelled, grabbing Marcus by the arm as we retreated into the trees. The beast was right behind us, its footsteps thunderous and relentless. This wasn't just a mission anymore. It was survival. We ran through the forest, the deafening roar of the creature echoing behind us. My lungs burned as I pushed myself harder, weaving between trees and trying to stay ahead of the beast. Marcus was right on my heels, his rifle bouncing against his chest as he sprinted. This thing's faster than it should be, Marcus shouted, glancing over his shoulder. No kidding, I snapped, gripping my rifle tighter. The thundering footsteps behind us were closing in, each one shaking the ground beneath my boots. We need to regroup with the second unit. Now. Ahead, I spotted a narrow ravine cutting through the forest. It was steep, but it might buy us a few seconds. This way, I yelled, veering toward it. We slid down the embankment, loose dirt and rocks tumbling with us. My boots hit the bottom with a thud, and I turned just in time to see the creature leap down after us. It landed with inhuman grace, its glowing yellow eyes locked on us. "Marcus, go," I shouted, raising my rifle and firing off another burst. The bullets tore into the beast's chest, but it didn't stop. It lunged, claws outstretched, and I barely managed to dodge to the side. Marcus didn't argue. He scrambled up the opposite side of the ravine, firing a few shots over his shoulder to cover me. I followed, my legs screaming in protest as I clawed my way up the slope. At the top, we found ourselves in a dense thicket, the trees packed tightly together. The creature hesitated at the base of the ravine, its head snapping side to side as it studied us. It wasn't mindless. That much was clear. This thing was calculating its next move. "Second unit, this is Larkin," I barked into my comms. "We've made contact and are under pursuit. We need backup now." Donovan's voice crackled in my ear. "We're en route. Hold your position if you can." I looked at Marcus, his face pale and glistening with sweat. "We're not holding anything," I muttered. "This thing's not waiting for backup." As if on cue, the creature let out another guttural roar and started climbing the ravine with terrifying speed. Marcus cursed under his breath and fired again, the shots barely slowing it down. "Keep moving," I ordered, pulling him by the arm. We tore through the forest, the thicket scratching at our gear and slowing us down. Every second felt like an eternity as the beast closed the gap. Then, up ahead, I saw a flash of light through the trees. A signal flare. Relief flooded me as I realized it was the second unit, their position marked by a bright red glow. "There," I shouted. We burst into the clearing just as the second unit opened fire. High-caliber rounds tore through the air, slamming into the creature with enough force to finally stagger it. It let out an enraged howl, its massive body twisting as it struggled to stay upright. Fall back," Donovan shouted, waving us toward a fortified position built from makeshift barricades. Marcus and I dove behind cover, panting and covered in dirt. The beast roared again, but this time it didn't charge. Instead, it paced at the edge of the clearing, its eyes glowing like twin suns in the darkness. It was wounded but not defeated, and the intelligence in its gaze was unmistakable. "This isn't over," Donovan said, his voice grim as he reloaded his weapon. "Not by a long shot." The clearing became a war zone. The second unit laid down suppressive fire, their weapons spitting lead as the beast darted in and out of the tree line. It was like trying to hit a shadow. Fast, fluid, and almost impossible to track. Every time I thought it would retreat, it came back, testing our defenses like a predator circling its prey. "It's learning," I muttered, my hand steady despite the hammering of my heart. Donovan crouched beside me, his rifle aimed at the darkness. "It's testing us," he replied grimly. "And it's smart enough to know we're not invincible." As if to prove his point, the creature charged again, moving in a blur of fur and muscle. It slammed into the barricade with enough force to splinter the wood, sending a few operatives sprawling. I fired, my bullets ripping into its shoulder, but it barely flinched. "Reloading," Marcus yelled, fumbling with a fresh magazine. "Keep it together," Donovan barked, taking aim. A well-placed shot from his rifle caught the beast in the leg, and it stumbled, snarling in pain. But even injured, it was relentless. The air was thick with smoke and the acrid smell of gunpowder. The sounds of gunfire, shouting, and the beast's guttural growls filled my ears, but through it all, I noticed something. Movement in the trees. "Hold fire," I shouted, my voice cutting through the chaos. The team hesitated, their weapons still trained on the creature. For a moment, everything was eerily quiet, save for the labored breathing of the beast as it crouched at the edge of the clearing. Then, out of the shadows, another figure emerged. At first, I thought it was another operative, but as it stepped into the light, my blood ran cold. It was another one. Slightly smaller, but no less terrifying, with the same glowing yellow eyes and powerful frame. "Two of them," Marcus whispered, his voice barely audible. "Fall back," Donovan ordered, his voice sharp and commanding. We didn't need to be told twice. The team retreated toward a secondary position deeper in the forest, abandoning the barricades as the two creatures closed in. They didn't pursue immediately. Instead, they stood there, watching us with an intelligence that was almost human. As we regrouped, Donovan activated a secure comm link. HQ, this is Alpha Team. We've got a situation. 2 targets confirmed, both hostile. Requesting immediate air support. The response was almost immediate. Negative, Alpha Team. Air support is unavailable in your current location. You are authorized to neutralize the targets by any means necessary. Of course we are, Donovan muttered under his breath, slamming the receiver down. I leaned against a tree, my mind racing. One of these things was bad enough, but 2. And they were coordinated. This wasn't just a random attack. This was calculated. What's the plan? I asked, forcing myself to focus. Donovan looked at me, his expression grim. We split up. Half the team will lead one of them away, while the rest set a trap for the other. It's the only way we stand a chance. Marcus shook his head. That's suicide. You're asking half the team to be bait. Donovan didn't flinch. You got a better idea, because if we don't act now, those things will pick us off one by one. The team fell silent, the weight of his words sinking in. Finally, I nodded. I'll go, I said. Marcus stared at me like I'd lost my mind. You're serious? Someone has to, I replied. And I'm not about to sit around waiting for those things to come to us. Donovan clapped a hand on my shoulder. Good man, we'll make it count. As the team prepared to split, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were walking into a trap. One we might not walk out of. The forest seemed to close in around us as our group splintered. I was part of the bait team, tasked with leading one of the creatures away while the others set the trap. Marcus was with me, his usual bravado replaced with a grim determination. The rest of the team, led by Donovan, faded into the darkness behind us, their mission clear. Kill the other one, or die trying. Still think this was a good idea? Marcus asked, his voice low but tense. I glanced at him, gripping my rifle tighter. No, but it's the only shot we've got. We moved quickly, our path lit only by the faint glow of our headlamps. The forest was unnaturally quiet, the usual sounds of nocturnal wildlife replaced by an oppressive silence. It felt like the trees themselves were holding their breath, waiting for the inevitable. Then we heard it. A low growl that seemed to come from everywhere at once. I stopped, scanning the darkness. It's close, I whispered. Marcus nodded, his eyes darting between the shadows. Yeah, no kidding. You got a plan, or are we just winging this? Before I could answer, the creature emerged, stepping into the beam of my headlamp. Its massive frame was covered in matted fur, and its eyes glowed with a malevolent intelligence. But this one wasn't the same as the first. Its movements were slower, more deliberate, as if it was studying us. Hold your fire, I said, raising a hand. Marcus shot me a look. Are you insane? Just wait, I hissed. The creature tilted its head, its yellow eyes locked onto mine. For a moment, I thought I saw something in its expression. Curiosity, maybe even recognition. But then it roared, the sound ripping through the night like a shockwave, and the moment was gone. Move, I shouted, firing a burst to force it back. Marcus and I sprinted through the trees, the beast hot on our heels. We led it toward a narrow gorge we'd scouted earlier, a natural choke point that Donovan's team had rigged with explosives. The plan was simple. Lure it in, detonate the charges, and pray it was enough. Almost there, Marcus yelled, his voice barely audible over the creature's guttural snarls. I glanced back, my heart pounding. The beast was closing in, its massive form weaving through the trees with terrifying speed. I fired over my shoulder, the bullets sparking off the rocks as it lunged toward us. We hit the gorge at a dead sprint, skidding to a stop just as the creature reached the edge. It paused, its claws digging into the ground as it stared at us with those haunting yellow eyes. Come on, I muttered under my breath, raising my rifle. Just a little closer. The creature stepped forward, its movements cautious. It knew something was wrong, but its primal instincts wouldn't let it back down. As it crossed into the gorge, I heard Donovan's voice crackle over the comms. Target in position. Stand by. Marcus and I dove behind a rock as the charges detonated. The explosion was deafening, a wall of fire and debris ripping through the gorge and engulfing the creature. The force of the blast knocked us off our feet, and for a moment, everything was silent. When the dust settled, I staggered to my feet, coughing and disoriented. The gorge was a smoking crater, the ground littered with jagged rocks and the smoldering remains of trees. But the creature was gone. This happened in 1972 when I was 14 years old. My father decided to drive up a logging road that led up to Brown Mountain in North Carolina. We had a 1969 Ford van with 4 rows of seats. In this van were my father at the wheel, my mother, us 5 kids aged between about 8 and 15, and I think my father's friend and his wife. Long van with lots of seats, all full. I think my father must have wanted to see the lights at night, the famous Brown Mountain lights, because, they appear at night. This is maybe not directly related, but then again maybe it was. My father had met an old fellow named Ralph. I was there. It was at some local store that carried Mr. Ralph's pamphlets about getting to the top of Brown Mountain and being taken into a crystal chamber by the UFO people there. I think they promised to take Mr. Ralph and his wife with them when things got very strange. So we all bounced up a dirt road after sundown on a mountain probably 60 miles from home. The road just kept switching back and getting narrower as the night went completely dark. All you could see was what the headlights lit, and that was only 20 yards at most. I vaguely recall that I may have been worried during the drive up that the saucer people might not like us as much as they liked Mr. Ralph. After what I honestly believe was well over an hour, and maybe closer to 2, the road was so narrow, steep, and rutted that my father was struggling to keep the van going farther, and there seemed to be no place wide enough to turn around. In those days my father had a cheater knob, aka unalive himself knob on the van's steering wheel. These are legal, but do yourself a favor and don't get one unless you need it. This knob is important to the story because we ran into a ditch running across the road. Good thing we were only going 10 miles an hour. It was still a spine rattler, and my father's hand cracked the windshield while holding the broken off knob. I don't think his hand was actually broken, but it was out of the game. My father's friend took over, somehow got a loaded van out of a ditch somewhere far up Brown Mountain, found a way to get us turned 180, and drove down off the mountain. Funny thing, we were back on the main road within 10 minutes. I never understood how we got down off the mountain and back to the main road that quickly, especially after it had taken us over an hour to drive up the mountain. Another strange thing also occurred. We saw hundreds of bright orbs on the drive down the mountain. None of us ever understood what happened that night. One year during deer season, my uncle went out on the general hunt. He hiked a few miles in the middle of the night to get to his spot. When he got there, he heard some soft moans and couldn't find where it was coming from, but then noticed something large high up in a tree. Since it was still dark, he disregarded it and walked to his tree stand and settled in for the morning. As the light grew, he started to get a better and better picture of what was up in the tree. To his horror, it was a slumped-over man. He quickly got freaked out and then noticed through his spotting scope that it was a dead hunter sitting in a tree stand. Turns out the guy died of a heart attack, and my uncle likely experienced his last moments of life, but didn't realize what was happening. My uncle always talked about how creepy it was being in the forest early morning and going through that situation. We, my cousins, and I would always hear this story on Halloween. When I got older, I assumed it was something to spook us, but my dad confirmed it was true. A few years ago, my mom's hairdresser invited her to go deer hunting up in the Oregon mountains. We were living in a small town called Doris, right on the California-Oregon border at the time. My mom isn't a serious hunter, and unlike those who wake up before dawn to get out into the woods, they didn't even get to their hunting spot until later in the morning. They drove for quite a while through some really remote areas, somewhere between Klamath Falls and Medford, Oregon. The roads were deserted, and the area was thick with woods, with a few small meadows scattered here and there. When they finally found a place to park, they decided to split up and explore on foot. My mom stayed close to the truck while her friend walked up the road and around a bend. About an hour later, her friend came back in a hurry, looking a bit shaken. She told my mom she had found some tracks that were absolutely huge, something she'd never seen before, and frankly, they scared her. She wanted my mom to come check them out because my mom had the bigger gun, a 36, while her friend only had a 30-30. When they reached the spot, my mom was shocked by what she saw. Her friend suggested they might be elk tracks, but my mom knew better. She told me later that nothing with hooves could have made those tracks. They looked like human footprints, only much, much bigger. Like someone had walked through the woods barefoot, but with feet the size of something you'd only imagine in stories. Both of them felt a wave of discomfort and unease, so they decided to leave as quickly as possible. I was sitting at my computer when my mom told me this story. I asked her just how big the tracks were, and she started to show me with her hands. Then she stopped, pointed at my keyboard and said, "They were as big as that thing right there." My keyboard is about 17 inches long and 10 inches wide at its thickest point. The thought of something that massive, leaving tracks like that in the middle of nowhere, still gives me chills. Starting roughly 19 years ago, I'm 38 now, I was in the woods behind one of my friend's houses camping. We were maybe only 550 yards away from the house, and only took a few steps in the direction of the house to see it on the other side of the cornfield that was used for hay that year. We had a fire started, and we were just hanging out talking and enjoying the summer night. We had gone to Lake Michigan earlier, and a girl we met that lived nearby decided to come with us and hang out, being our one friend knew her somewhat from his job. We all agreed she would get the tent, and we would all sleep around the fire. After an hour or so, we had an amazingly bright light shine down right over us. We all kinda wigged and got up, but then a strong wind came down on us and the light slowly moved away. We all decided it was the police helicopter looking for marijuana plants and seen our heat plus the fire on the thermal camera. We all laid back down, and within maybe 10 minutes, we would all be backs to each other, hearts racing. As we laid there was an ear-splitting screech. Before any of us could get up, something with some considerable weight hit the leaf-littered forest floor. Now, all of us standing, a creature that seemed no larger than a wolf, ran, not walked, multiple times around us before we could get a bead on its location. The girl, sorry forgot her name, now was in the tent doorway, and two of my friends had almost teleported into the tent. They moved so fast in fear. At this point the creature had stopped moving, but we still couldn't pinpoint where it had stopped. The only views we could get was it had a gray and white fur, not patterned but random patches. It moved more like a person on all fours, but way faster than even a wolf on a dead run. We also realized that the helicopter we figured was the dope scope was still nearby. Not far, but we could see stars being blocked out by it moving from west to east, almost like it was strafing. Another 10 adrenaline filled. Minutes passed and we assumed it had left. After another hour of laying there listening and waiting for its return, we all started falling asleep. In the morning, nothing in the campsite was disturbed and nothing was damaged. I walked back to the house to get some eggs and other things for breakfast. Nothing felt off except for the constant feeling of being watched from the woods. But after that long night, I could understand it. On the way back though, at the different angle of view, I noticed 3 distinct areas in the hay that were pressed down in an almost perfect triangle. Once I got closer, there was a static feeling to the air, and all my arm hairs stood up. As I got closer to the woods, a strong feeling to turn around hit me like a ton of bricks. Across the field around 250 yards away, there is a piece of the woods that splits the 2 fields. In that narrow strip of trees stood a cross between a dog and a great ape about 6-7 feet tall on 2 legs. It seemed I'd say uncomfortable being on 2 legs as it swayed side to side like it was unbalanced. I turned back and headed to the campsite and made breakfast, saying nothing to the rest, as heading back to the house would have us going right by the creature. Roughly 3 hours later we headed to the house, and there was no sightings or off feelings. The next sighting was about 4 years later, while hunting family property about 4 miles from the original sighting. Sitting in the woods by myself that evening, I had a group of 4 does come in. Now I would sit in the thicker woods, but had a 270 sighted in at 100 yards. I had 3 lanes that were optimal for that rifle, but 2 years before got a hard shot on a buck only 75 yards away and threaded a needle with the bullet, so I was very comfortable with any shot. Anyway, the does were calm and moving slowly, feeding with no care in the world. After several minutes, the largest doe kept checking behind them, hearing something, but I could not. They suddenly jumped all at the same time and even crashed into trees trying to get away. I still heard nothing and couldn't see anything in the direction she kept looking. Slowly, I noticed a gray and white-haired creature moving in down like a canine hunting. When I got the first good look, I immediately recognized it. This time, though, I didn't have any anxiety, no racing heart, and felt completely calm, unlike the first encounter. It was not because I had my rifle. As the first encounter, I had my shotgun that I carried too, and from the house even. It moved through the woods and almost seemed to be avoiding me, but also the feeling it knew I was there. It walked behind the denser underbrush and would almost leap through the shooting lanes I had as to try and stay hidden and not give me a shot. Not that I was going to, as I have a strong belief that cryptids and paranormal interactions should be viewed and felt with strong actions, a last resort option. It only made a very low growl, as it would have been entering the field about 75 yards from me. I waited around 30 minutes before heading in for the night, as the creature moving through would have kept anything from coming in. As I walked back, I never felt the need to rush or even look behind me. Coming into the small grass field we let grow over on the property, there once again was a rush of wind, and a dark object in the sky, which I could see better this time as a triangular-shaped object, but had rounded out sides like a triangle that was filled, and the sides were about to burst. It moved slowly the direction the creature moved, and then quickly disappeared in the opposite direction, extremely quickly. The last time I had an interaction with the same creature was only 3 years ago, but now 55 miles to the south. I was hunting the Allegan State Game area only a few days into the firearm season. Anyone that knows that area during deer season knows it is filled with hunters from all over. I usually would go to the more difficult areas, as the city people wanted to hunt 10 feet from their vehicle and not have to work for their deer. I was deep in the woods by the Swan Creek area, and the sun was just starting to get up to be able to break through the dense trees. I am used to the weird and sometimes unsettling feeling that area gives you, but today felt weird. I hadn't seen any other cars on my way to the area, so I felt good about a successful hunt. As the minutes went by, I could hear a few deer moving in, and was hoping a buck wouldn't be far behind. It was cooler this morning than the last few, and it was easy to see one's breath. I started seeing the breath from behind some berry shrubs that I believed to be the deer I had heard, and was excited to see them move through. After 10 minutes went by and the breathing kept coming from the same spot, I started thinking maybe there is a buck behind the shrubs, and he can smell me or knows something's up. Then the does all booked it through the opening by the shrubs and were full speed through the woods. Shortly behind them was a sight I forgot about, and this time had my heart almost exploding and my anxiety at max. Without any threat towards me, at least at the moment, my fight or flight was at red level, and I was panicking what to do. I'm around 1,000 yards in dense woods with many hollows and ridges to get to my vehicle, and nobody hunting with me to try and get to me. Being the zone I was in, I had my shotgun, but with what I have seen in the past, I wasn't too sure I was safe even with it. I traveled roughly 150, staying relatively slowly as to not make noise. As I waited by a tree and was listening and looking behind me, that wood were dead quiet. No birds, no squirrels running about, and no wind. Some would think this is great because you can hear everything, but those who spend time in the woods know when an apex animal moves and either the warning calls go off or it goes silent in the woods. I kept moving at a more increased pace and kept checking my phone for better service to call my in-laws to head out to my area for assistance. I was maybe 200 yards from my vehicle, and I seen what I thought was my true end. On a small mound about 75 yards ahead stood a creature on all fours. But this one was different. The hair was brown and black, looked to be bigger, and this time the front half was fully visible, and I could see that it was the same kind of beast I've seen each time before. Half wolf, half great ape, and I thought this thing is a test tube baby of some mad scientist. It stared directly at me for about 5 minutes, and I was sure the other was somewhere close watching from behind. Then a huge gust of air came through the trees and the creature ran as if it was being hunted itself. I leaned against the tree by me and sighed and felt a huge relief wash over me, almost like a shower of protection. I opened my eyes and looked up, feeling I would see the same thing as before, but there was clouds and open sky. Then the clouds seemed to distort and get morphed. Kinda like when glass has a curve or defect, and it distorts your view of objects behind it. I know it was another craft flying above the trees, and it was either a different one altogether, or a different mechanism to hide being it was daylight this time. Now comes the really fun part. For about 2 years after I had almost ghost-like visits from these creatures. That is really the only way to explain it. They both would show up in my woods while collecting firewood or on a walk with my kids. Now I never got the same feelings I did the other times. I felt like it was a memory playing in my head, except they moved and did things I didn't physically see them do. One day I had my dog with me, which I trained to protect my kids and wife at the time. He even tried to attack me when my ex took him in the woods on a leash. I put on a new hoodie and pulled the hood over my face. He came after me, and even calling his name didn't calm him just when he was close enough to smell me, so I know catches everything around him. He was not on a leash this day, and not even 10 feet, and his hair raises, and he starts growling, but he seemed confused as to why himself. Then I seen both beasts about 20 feet ahead. I could see through them, and they moved as if made of smoke. My dog lunged at one and went right through it, with it dissipating like mist thinning in the morning sun. The other walked behind a tree and never came out the other side. It's been a few years now and I haven't seen the creatures fully, but keep getting shadows at the edge of my view that look like them, and they keep getting close on both sides each time. I have the biggest problem with how can what was a full physical interaction with what I figured was a cryptid, or maybe otherworld being now be more paranormal and spirit interaction that seems like a soul following me. Could they have died and I am the one they didn't get, or are they projecting to me like a calling? Either way, holding it in for years and keeping the other 2 encounters from the couple people I still talked to from the original group, I finally figured I'd put the encounters and instances out there and let others give their feelings and takes on it. None of it has interfered with my life other than a few close heart attacks from anxiety or the couple sleepless nights right after the encounters. Take as you will, and am looking forward to the responses. But as for going from a physical interaction to spectral over the years, I am lost, and I am hoping I can get answers for the most extreme situation I have been through out of all my experiences with physical oddities, and those that seem to be those of long ago lost between planes and afraid to move on. Comment or don't, I needed it out there and wonder if there are others with the same type of bizarre interactions that last decades and even change drastically. So I'm currently stationed on an aircraft carrier commissioned in '77. There is never a lack of creepiness on that thing at night. I work security on it at night, and we rotate from nights to days every so often. I remember one night my buddy was heading up to the flight deck with a rifle from where our armory is, first deck up to the flight deck 04 level, which is a 5-story difference. It's a lot of distance to travel alone at night. So he gets to a certain part of the boat that's almost pitch black, 1 story down from the flight deck, and he hears these footsteps behind him. He looks back and no one is there. So he picks up the pace, and as he does, he hears the same footsteps. He looks back, and this time he sees a dark figure about 30 feet behind him. At this point, his full luck that switch turns on, and he starts briskly jogging. He then hears the footsteps also pick up the pace and run after him. He dead sprints up the last flight of stairs up to the flight deck and hustles over to where we are on the front of the ship. He's white as a ghost and tells us what happened. We stay away from that area of the ship now. Other than that, down on the 7th deck of the ship, second to last deck before you hit the hull, there are munitions storage areas, basically where we keep our bombs for planes. Well, back in the day, a little girl falls down one of the ladder wells, which is legit a 6-story drop to the bottom. She ended up dying. There are chains and various other items that can be moved, and they say at night if you're not paying attention, zoning out, she'll come by and rattle the chains hanging from the ceiling and move things. The fantail, which is an area that is outside the ship that looks over the water on the back of the ship, there are multiple ghosts that mess with 2 lookouts that stand watch out there. One of the ghosts is of a little girl. You'll hear her giggling, then a bouncy ball bouncing on the deck out there, then a splash in the water. There is also a ghost that will come to you as you're nodding off on the watch. He'll be in his dress uniform. He'll tap you on the shoulder and say, "Don't report this." Then he'll jump into the water. Other than that, it's always a constant feeling of being watched at night, if you're alone in certain areas. The only other story I have is the time I played with a Ouija board. But that's a long story. Back in the winter of 2015, I was in school for my job. It was my first time really outside the house, making my own money, So I thought I could do whatever I wanted with my time and money, now that my parents weren't breathing down my neck. One of the things we did on the weekends was go to the mall, so one fateful day at the mall, I went into a Spencer's and saw a Ouija board. I had been interested in them since middle school, watching videos on early YouTube when every video you searched wasn't some YouTuber staging a Ouija board experience, but actual videos of spooky stuff happening. Honestly, it was more of a thrill than actually going out and watching the latest horror flick. Because of this, I decided to buy one and take it back to the barracks. As soon as we got home, I cracked it open and decided to start playing immediately. It garnered attention quickly, and I had droves of people coming to play, watch, and criticize. We played for a few nights, random people jumping in sometimes, but the main characters in this story are myself, a girl we'll call Kate, a girl we'll call Mandy, and a dude we'll call Andrew. Some of the biggest things that happened before the big night were: we established a connection with a spirit we'll call Marcus that followed Mandy's aunt for a long time. We asked for a sign that this spirit was really there, and it sent a fox over to the pavilion we were sitting and playing at, about 20 foot from where we were sitting, and it sat there for nearly half an hour. Whether it was a coincidence or it was a deliberate sign, I will never be able to say for sure, but I believe wholeheartedly that it was the latter. It kept telling us personal things about our lives that none of the others could possibly know. I don't remember exactly what they were due to this happening nearly 3 years ago, but I believe it was like birthdays, parent or sibling names, etc. Finally, all these things lead up to the last night we played. On this night, it was business as usual. I forgot to mention that the planchette at this point was moving fast as hell, to the point that I should have known something was up. But the spirits have a weird way of making the whole experience seem exhilarating to the point where you forget about the warning signs. We get to a point in the session where the planchette isn't moving anymore, which is odd because it was just moving like crazy. The seating arrangement at the table is Kate is across from me, Andrew is across from me diagonally, and Mandy is to my left. To my left, I hear Mandy laughing. It was odd because nothing is happening, no one told a joke, nothing is even remotely supposed to be funny. I look over, and even though she is laughing, there are tears streaming down her face. I know some messed up stuff is happening at this point. I see Andrew get up and start backing away, which you are never supposed to do because it breaks the circle and allows spirits to have more free reign over our realm. He backs away a few steps with a terrified look on his face, then he turns and bolts. I asked him why he did this about a year after it happened, and he told me that he felt a huge hand on his shoulder, which prompted him to expeditiously get the heck out of there. Kate ran too, and she says she ran to check on Andrew, but I believe she ran because she was terrified. Hell, I was too. So here I am with Mandy beside me cackling and crying, with me not knowing what to do. So I turn to her and ask her if she is okay. Yes, I said it because it wasn't her, looks at me with a stare that sent my blood running cold and made my stomach drop into the deepest recesses of my abdomen. It then says, Mandy isn't here anymore, and cackles even more. At this point, I believe I'm screwed. We have to muster for accountability in like half an hour, so if I can't fix this by then, I am going to get it from the full force of my chain of command. So I turn to it, look it straight in the eye, and start saying a bunch of stuff along the lines of, if you don't leave her body, you will create a devout Christian out of this situation. It's the only thing I could think of doing. I couldn't leave her there, and honestly, the thought of something messing with her like that gave me the determination and mental fortitude I needed to deal with that situation. In the end, it worked. She came to, and I asked her if she was okay. She said yes, but she needed some rest and went back to the barracks. As soon as she started walking away, I grabbed the board and the planchette, threw them in the box, ran to the dumpster behind our barracks, and threw them in. Bad move, I'll mention in the aftermath. The situation still isn't over. When I ran back to the dumpster, I saw Andrew pacing back and forth with Kate there trying to comfort him. I ran over to where they were after disposing of the evil. Yeah, I'm being a bit dramatic, but this is the first time I've ever written this story down. And there he was pacing back and forth saying he needed to go back. Back being the pavilion we played with the Ouija board at. I asked him what was going on with him at that moment a year after, and he told me that he looked back at the pavilion and heard what sounded like thousands of voices chanting. He saw a dark figure there as well, coaxing him to go back. I will introduce a new person to the story. Her name is Marie. I asked her to come over and help. She was of the Wiccan religion, so I thought she just might be able to help. and she did, albeit at a price of our friendship. She was furious that I did this to the people around me. She helped him. I asked him recently what she did to help him, and he swears up and down that he saw her deceased grandmother beside him protecting him, while Marie handled whatever was hurting him. He came back too. I also forgot to mention that before Marie came out to help I tried reading the Bible to him, and whenever I did it seemed like it physically hurt him. That's it for the night really. I downloaded a song called God's Not Dead by the Newsboys, which is a super duper Christian song if you couldn't tell, and played it in my headphones with the lights on in my room while I went to sleep. I still didn't feel okay that night or the nights to follow. The aftermath. The next morning I woke up and got in ranks to march to school. Everyone was looking at me and Andrew weird. He was telling everyone not to be around me because I was evil, and this continued for about 2 weeks. I felt all alone and scared shitless, but I persevered because that's how I get down. At school, Marie told me to go find the board and burn it, so that we can close the session and make sure the spirits don't harass us anymore. She told me this because she knew we didn't say goodbye on the board to close the session. At our lunch break, I go dumpster diving to find this evil in there, and although the same trash from the night before is in there, the box with the board in it is gone. To this day, I don't know what happened to it. Skeptics will say it got taken by someone, but I firmly believe it is following Mandy. We all graduated and left the school. Me, Kate, and Andrew came to the same command in the States, and Mandy went to the Middle East. Coincidentally, our ship ended up stopping at her command in the Middle East, and I happened to see Mandy again. As soon as we made eye contact, she did an immediate 180-degree turn and walked away. Weird. All in all, me, Kate, and Andrew got over it. Nothing really happened to me and Kate. Andrew had nightmares for a while afterward, but he eventually turned out okay too. As for Mandy, I don't know what's going on in her life anymore. We fell off, and she hasn't contacted any of us since school. I hurt people that day, and I know without a doubt the things that happened that night were 100% real. There's no way that they all coordinated like that just to make me feel bad for using a Ouija board, and if they did, they all deserve freaking Oscars for their performance that night. That stuff is the scariest and most humbling thing that has ever happened to me. It's strange though, after that night, I vowed to never use another Ouija board again. But if someone were to pull one out and offer me a seat at the board, I wouldn't turn them down. Spirits have a weird way of controlling you sometimes. I hope you guys enjoyed the story, and sorry for the bad use of the English language, especially the overuse of commas. I live in a small city in northern Ontario, Canada, and I remember thinking this place was just odd as a kid. When I was 7, I used to tell my friends a lot about how I thought the whole town was haunted. But I've actually seen some pretty weird things here. My grandma lives down in Waterloo, but every once in a while she comes up to visit and stays in her old house by one of 2 large lakes in our city called Trout Lake. Trout Lake is quite large at 69 m maximum depth. Yes, that really is the maximum depth, with cold dark brown waters a mystery below the waves. When I was younger, I used to hear stories from my father about a creature called the Trout Lake Monster, an apparently large fish or crocodile-like creature. He had heard most of these stories from his own grandfather, and the first sightings of the creature supposedly took place in the 20s or 30s. This monster isn't exactly famous or anything, but a lot of the older generation know of it, or have at least heard of it. One summer when I was visiting my grandma, I ran down to the lake's edge with my sister to throw some rocks. We liked seeing if we could throw them into the drop-off area of the lake, which was 40 feet offshore or so. That day I remember looking out into the water, and probably about 150-200 feet away, I saw something that I always described as an eagle beak rise up out of the water and then submerge again. I remember it being yellow or yellow tinted, and I still don't know what it was, but I suspect it was trash now. When I told my family, no one believed me. I was 8 and had a very active imagination, so they were sure I was making it up, and my sister never saw it. I didn't really like swimming in there after that. But that wasn't the only time I saw whatever it was either. The same year, my dad and I were driving on a road that was elevated higher than the lake, so when you found a clearing in the trees where you could just look down at the lake from above. The road we were on led to an old abandoned army base, and no one drove on it, so that day we stopped to watch the lake, and my dad talked about the army base. Right when we were about to leave, we looked down at the lake and saw a huge shadow under the water right near the beach. It looked like a giant snake, and I remember specifically asking my dad if he saw it too, to which he said that yes, he did. We drove away not long after because whatever it was just moving slowly toward the shore. Now looking back on that sighting, I'm quite sure it was just a shadow from a cloud we saw. Because if it was a real animal, it would have been about 60 feet long or more, and an animal that size would not realistically be able to live in Trout Lake, let alone maintain a breeding population in Trout Lake. Also, it was moving extremely slowly toward the shore where people were swimming. All in all, there's no way it was an animal. A year or two later, I think this was in 2014, I was at my grandma's house again, and was looking out a window that faces the lake with binoculars. At this point, I was actually looking for the monster. I believed in lake monsters as a kid, and my 2 prior sightings coupled with the stories meant that every time I went out there I was searching for the creature and sitting down by the lake. While I was looking out the window, I spotted something swimming with its head above the water. And this is the only sighting I can't easily explain away. It was swimming through the ice. The ice was melting at this time. It was around early March. I freaked when I saw it because not only did it validate me, but it was something I had never seen before anywhere, except in deep sea documentaries. The creature was green and had a head similar to an eel, with lips and all on it. The head was above the water, and the creature also had its back sticking out a little too. The back had a sail-like fin on it, not anything crazy, but small and rounded in shape. People came over to see what I was yelling about. I was basically screaming, "Look, the monster! Look!" And my aunt actually looked through the binoculars and said that she couldn't tell what it was. The creature then kept swimming, and I lost sight of it because it was obscured by a tree in front of the window. I waited for it to appear on the other side, but it never did. My family members who didn't see it said it must have been a beaver. What beaver is green? I tried everything to think of what a rational explanation would be. I looked up muskies, which do live in the lake, but they didn't look like the creature, which was about 5 feet long with a rounded head. Muskies also don't have fins on their backs. I thought about frogs, but again it didn't match, of course. The only thing I can think of is an eel. The last time I saw something odd in the lake was in 2021 during the summer, when my dad and I drove out to my grandma's house to check up on it. This was one of the times she wasn't visiting, and the house needs to be checked on every once in a while in case there's flooding in the basement. As we drove past the road where you can best see the lake, I noticed something in the distance that essentially looked like the water was boiling or bubbling in a circular shape. I took out my phone to take a video of it, but it was almost impossible to see on the camera because of the distance it was from the moving car, and also because my phone's camera quality was just bad. I'm not sure if I still have the video. I think the most likely explanation for it is fish feeding near the surface. Not sure what else it would be. Also, there was a boat accident on the lake in the 50s where a couple and their dog went out onto the lake in a fiberglass boat and disappeared. Their remains were discovered in 2007, but for a long time, some people believed the monster was the cause of the disappearance. Also, I would like to add that this is a complete rumor, with probably zero truth behind it. But allegedly when the OPP were searching for the boat and bodies, they also found a huge tooth among the wreckage, which was later destroyed because it was feared talk of a monster would harm tourism and fewer people would fish and swim in the lake. Again, purely a rumor, there is nothing to prove it at all. The stories my dad told me of monsters in the lake, that his granddad had told him, were nothing like the creature that I may have encountered. The most popular story is of a woman walking her small dog onto the edge of her dock in the 30s, and when the dog walked to the edge of the dock, a massive fish lunged out of the water and dragged the dog under. Of course, nothing proves this story is true, but it certainly makes me think twice about swimming in that lake. One day I'd like to buy an ROV and pilot it in the lake, just to see what it's like down there, monster or not. Still have no clue what it was. In November last year, my friend and I started to drive up to Scotland to do some fishing and eventually make our way to Edinburgh. After the first day of catching some salmon and brown trout, we stored our catch in the cooler box. We contemplated whether to sleep in the car that night since we had left quite late to set up camp around 4:30ish and the sun was going down. Eventually I said, "Let's set up a fire and cook the fish." I didn't drive all the way to Scotland to sleep in the car. My friend agreed. As we set off looking for a spot to camp, we found a little wooded area next to a car park near a farm. We had looked into it prior, and apparently, you can basically camp anywhere in Scotland as long as you leave the place as you found it. So we grabbed all of our gear out of the car and started setting up our campsites. 20 minutes later, we had a fire going, 2 fold-up chairs, and 2 tents set up. My tent was out of view from my friend. This will be relevant later. We were glad we chose to camp outside instead of sleeping in the car as we smoked a few joints and reminisced about school life, etc. My friend struggled to keep his eyes open, and at 2 a.m. he called it a night, crawling into his tent and zipping it shut. I sat there with my feet up on my friend's now empty chair, listening to the sounds of the wildlife. I shut off the torch I had hung up on the tree next to us, leaving us in darkness apart from the burning embers from the coal. It must have been 3 or so minutes before I started to hear the crunching of leaves and snapping of twigs that seemed to be coming toward me. Being a quite rational person, I passed it off as a fox drawn to the scraps of food we might have laying around. I was quickly proven wrong when I heard a sniffle, like someone with a cold clearing their nose. My hair quickly turned from chilled out to paranoia as I felt a heavy dread come over me, my mind racing. Why the hell would someone be here in the woods at 2 to 3 a.m.? Why are they coming towards me? I slowly reached down into my pocket and felt my heart drop as I didn't feel the smooth blade of my pocket knife. I must have left it in the tent. All the while, I heard the shuffling coming closer and closer, and my heartbeat racing. Through the darkness, I saw a middle-aged man, clean-shaven with parted hair, around 5'10", slowly creeping toward me, almost on all fours like a predator trying to stay out of sight. I sat there paralyzed, unable to speak. My mouth was so dry that I could hardly swallow. That's when I realized he hadn't even seen me. Being under the tree with no light source, I must have blended in. Also, with there only being one tent in view, I guess he thought my friend was the only one camping here. He got closer to the tent and half-breathed, half-whispered, "Come on, do it," in a raspy voice, creeping me out. Unable to bear the thought of what he might do next, I finally spoke up. "Oi, can I help you?" He jumped up in shock, and his whole demeanor changed. He looked at me mumbling awkwardly as he scurried back out of the woods. I sat there still trying to comprehend what had just happened and what I saw. Then, I saw headlights of a car turn on and drive away. I woke my friend up, and although he couldn't fully grasp what had happened, he could see how shook up I was. Without a full explanation from me, he let me grab our gear, and we slept in the car that night with the doors locked. I have a memory of being in the car late at night with my husband, driving cross country and looking for a spot to camp late at night. It was maybe 5 years ago. We were somewhere between Missouri and California, coming from North Carolina and having gone through Overland Park, Kansas, and Ogden, Utah that afternoon somewhere with a vast amount of flat, dry land with desert brush. Pulling off the highway and down an unmarked dirt road that seemed to go on for at least 2-3 miles, we came to a parking lot on our right, and some feet ahead there was a fence marked "No Trespassing" and a sign that said "Space Observation" and showed a military logo. I don't remember which part of the military it showed, but I remember thinking it was strange to see it partnered with space observation, perhaps the Army or Navy. Though I was scared of getting in trouble or worse, my husband pulled into the parking lot, which was relatively small and elongated. My husband pulled to the far left end of the parking lot and stopped the car. There was a fenced-off entrance with a path that looked a bit like train tracks leading past another fence and up a small slope where a single-story, small building was sitting next to a huge rocket. On the end of the parking lot directly opposite us, a black car with shaded windows was sitting. When we pulled in, I didn't notice anyone, but after arguing about leaving with my husband for a second, I saw a man suddenly sitting in the back driver's side of the vehicle. The front door on the same side was slightly ajar, and the back door was wide open, and the guy was sitting and staring forward before he met eyes with me. He was only maybe 15-20 feet from us. His skin seemed a strange pink color in the street lamp glow, his cheeks very angular and higher up than most people I've seen, and his eyes were darker and a lot larger than any humans, but not so large that you would notice if you quickly glanced past them in a crowd. When he looked at me, my whole body felt like it was struck by lightning. My heartbeat sped, my eyes watered. I began hyperventilating and scrambling and ranting at my husband to get the F out of here now. My husband saw the car, but not the man right in front of us. He shrugged me off and proposed, seriously, that we explore. He liked to explore places that seem a little scary, as did I, but he was a conspiracy theorist with a deep distrust, a deep hate, even of military and government. The fact he proposed this was maybe not so out of character if there wasn't a literal person right there, but this situation meant that proposal is wildly out of character for him. I have military family and pride myself on being a skeptic who likes to put facts where my mouth is, so you'd think my spouse would see my reaction as a huge reason to leave, as it was also out of character for me. My husband seemed to not see the man, though he was sitting directly across from us, and he tried to light-heartedly argue his case for why we should check the facility out. He began to try and get out of the car, and I grabbed him hard and began to hysterically cry and beg to leave. He laughed at how ridiculous he thought I was being aside from the other car and rocket. The place seemed like it was almost abandoned. Eventually, he had no choice but to relent and began pulling out at what I painstakingly remember as incredibly slow speed. As we were turning onto the dirt road, the man got out of the vehicle and stood up, keeping his eyes locked with mine almost the entire event. I remember he was wearing a white t-shirt and what looked like cargo shorts, but my memory could be slightly off by now. I've tried to forget about this and have tried to come up with reasons. This was less than I thought it was, but recently a friend was spouting some conspiracy hogwash that reminded me of this story. Pushing it out of my head so long, I'm struggling to find the area we were at, turning up no good results searching bases belonging to the military tasked with space observation or research. I can't find the long road with the fence and the parking lot with the track-like path and a rocket next to a small facility. I've considered it's a secret base, but I've run out of ideas to figure out where to find names of secret bases in the area. I want to find the area so I can see if anyone else had this or a similar experience in the same place. Scariest, most rationality-defying experience I've ever had. I still get chills and butterflies when I think about it. Some facts I remembered after posting. The man had mid-length black hair and an incredibly sharp brow bone. The longer road may have been unpaved or a well-traveled dirt road. There was a town close by. I remember seeing a first street and driving over a railroad track afterward. The largest sign was the one at the beginning of the right turn into the short paved way up to the fence and parking lot. It was brown, I am pretty sure, or another dark color. It specified space and another word like observation or research. The military branch named on the big sign was one I thought was uncommon to be a branch with duties regarding space at the time. Now I understand all major branches do. May have been Navy or Army. The gate directly ahead of the paved way was closed with a small sign on it that said no trespassing. The entrance in the parking lot looked to be made of concrete with a roof above it and a space for a guard to mind the gate, and was more open on the other side, sort of like a light rail or Caltrain platform. The path or tracks below or behind the platform led a very short distance and stopped many feet before the rocket area. The rocket was on a paved area directly to the right of the facility, possibly a little bit behind it. When asking my late husband about it, he always shrugged it off, and he claimed he didn't remember seeing anything and was forever disappointed I didn't let him explore. If I said that he was right in front of the guy, he got a little upset and called my sanity into question. For this reason, I didn't talk about this for years.
Last weekend, my 5-year-old and I went tent camping in the Uintas northeast of Utah. The weather was overcast weather. By the time we got done paddleboarding, we made our way back to camp. Once we got back to camp, I couldn't shake this feeling of unease. I mostly shrugged it off, thinking I am overthinking the safety of my child. One thing to point out, there was a trailer and a truck close to us, but I never saw anyone throughout our experience from there. At around 8 p.m., we started our campfire. We roasted brats and ate snacks. During this time, I would think I heard a crack or subtle movement, and thought it was just the embers popping. Once the sun finally set, I noticed it was completely pitch black outside the reach of our campfire, light most likely due to the overcast weather. At this point, I decided it's time to pack up our food and take it to the car. But I had this sudden feeling that I was being watched, and I decided to turn my headlamp light on. I faced 30 degrees to the right of me. About 40-50 feet from us, I see a small bush-like tree. Want to explain. This small bush-like tree was not thick or sturdy enough for something big to lean on or climb onto, and above the tree standing behind it, I see two big circle white eyes with a hint of purple staring straight at me. The animal or creature was far enough from the glow of fire. I couldn't see a silhouette of a body, but it was close enough that it was odd behavior, and it was only seconds from us if it ran towards us. My first thought was it was a bear standing on its hind legs, just being curious. It looked to be 8 feet tall or so. As I had my light facing the creature was abnormally close to our campsite, I grabbed my kiddo and bear spray and told my kid there's a bear behind a tree and assured him we will be fine. This creature just watched us intently. Suddenly, a few seconds later, my intuition screamed, "Get out now." I then started walking backwards towards my car and told my kid to walk slowly with me. The creature made no movement and tilted its eyes on us as we moved away until my light could no longer reach it. I can't explain this new type of fear I was experiencing. It was unnatural. I think prioritizing my boy's safety allowed me to get us to the car in a much more composed manner. Once in the car, we waited 30 minutes to see if it would come into the campsite to look for food. But nothing happened. I thought perhaps it left and we could sleep in the car to be safe. I decided that I am going to try and grab blankets from the tent, put out the fire, and we can pack out first thing in the morning. I thought wrong. The campsite from the car was about 150 feet away. To the right of us were big trees, and to the left of us is tall grass or brush. I get out of the door and turn my headlamp on. My light shines towards the brush, and laying low in the brush, I see the white eyes again staring up at me. I decided to try and act big and yell out at the creature, but it made a move towards me, which in return made me jump back into the car and reverse. I tried to shine my car lights towards it and couldn't see anything. I decided to find help. I drive down and find a friendly fellow dad camper who is happy to help me pack things up to leave. He arrives with a much brighter flashlight and his truck. As I am packing, he sees the eyes and mentions there's 2 of them. He states they're not moose, deer, cougars, and if it's a bear, it's really odd behavior, and he doesn't know exactly what they are. I face towards where he is shining his light, and I see a second pair of white eyes. At this point, I am terrified. One of them is standing tall, while the other is lower. This time they are much further back, as if they now know there's a new reach limit to the light devices being used. It wasn't until the lower set of eyes decides to stand up and be much taller than the first one, looking monstrous. This made my new friend very uneasy, and he quotes, "This has got me on edge. Let's just throw everything in your car and leave." The whole time we are packing out, I would catch these creatures creating a perimeter around us. They just walked around the campground in circles waiting for something, it seemed. I tried to think of rational possible theories. But the more I think about it, the more I can't shake the feeling this could have been a skinwalker or something else. They were too smart, intuitive, bold, scary, and didn't act like normal wildlife. Any thoughts on these creatures would mean the world to me. Thank you if you read this. I was getting goosebumps retelling the story. My story is scary, and I have been reluctant to mention it over the years. A few friends and family have been told, though I doubt that any of them believe me. The girlfriend who was with me at the time was deeply affected by the encounter. So much so that she has never really been the same since. In the summer of 2016, my then girlfriend and I were camping in the Lewis Mountain Campground, which is near Skyline Drive in the Shenandoah National Park. We had been there several times before, and we always enjoyed our time there. I set up a large tent and separate canopy. There were no other campers within 100 yards, but we could hear others in our proximity. We spent most of the daytime hiking throughout the area. The second night, a Saturday, early Sunday morning, we were fast asleep. We had been out and about all day and were very tired. I believe it was approximately 1 a.m. when we were both awoken by a crashing sound outside the tent. I looked out the flap but couldn't see anything, so I got up with a lantern and walked to the canopy. I noticed that the camp stove had tipped over. I assumed it was the wind or that one of the legs gave way. I shrugged it off and went back to the tent. I hadn't gone back to sleep when I heard a strange chattering sound. It reminded me of the sound a monkey makes when agitated. Once again I looked out the tent, and this time I noticed a tall shadow standing by the canopy. I woke my girlfriend and asked her to look. She was frightened, but eventually took a look. By this time, the shadow was moving slowly around the camp and making low, deep grunts. The first thing I thought was that a black bear was looking for a meal, but I then realized that this shadow was extremely tall and walking on two legs. I grabbed a flashlight and directed it towards the shadow. When I did, this shadow quickly materialized into a huge hairy beast that lunged towards us. We both bolted back into the tent and cowered against the far side. The grunts continued as this beast walked around the tent. I tried to call for help on my phone, but the signal cut out each time it connected. We were horrified by the ordeal, which continued for about 10 minutes. We were afraid to scream because we feared it would attack us. Eventually, the beast left the camp, but we stayed awake the rest of the night. We packed at daylight and quickly left. I later contacted the park authorities, but they dismissed my story. I'm sure that this beast was what people call a Bigfoot. My girlfriend and I soon broke off our relationship, but she has had emotional issues since that encounter. I have bad dreams at times and have never camped since. Thanks for reading. It was the summer of 2015 and I was in 12th grade. Me and two other friends went on the camping trip in Alberta, Canada. The drive up was normal. We got to the campsite, and oh yeah, one of my friends, who we will call Jeff, brought his girlfriend, who we will call Jane. When we pulled up to our camp spot, we unloaded our gear, then had lunch, and then we went on for a hike. Around 3 o'clock, we came back around 5:15, and for about 4 hours, we sat around the campfire telling stupid stories and other stuff like that. But this is when shit gets too real. We started to get the feeling we were being watched, which is weird because there was no one around us for about a whole kilometer. So we thought it just might be a fellow camper. So I yelled out, "Hey," but no response, so we just ignored it. Later that night, to the sound of snapping twigs, I looked out of the tent curiously, and what I saw was a creature about 20 meters away from the tent. It was about 8 feet tall with nut brown hair, and that's all I could really see in the moonlight. So I woke up my friend, and he went pale. He slowly closed the tent zipper and looked at me and said, "It's right outside." I told them that's impossible because it was just 20 meters away. Growing up, my house was very haunted. We had a lot of negative energy, and weird, paranormal stuff happened. But the most memorable event was the time I saw what I believed to be a ghost. Coming across this subreddit and delving more into crawlers, I have a feeling I might have seen one rather than a ghost, but I'd like input from other people. I've been searching for years for an explanation for what I saw, and I've never found anything as close as I have here. It's unsettling to see so many people sharing similar experiences, lol. When I was around 10 years old, my friend came to stay with me while her parents were out of town. She was experiencing anxiety from being away from them and ended up crying herself to sleep. While she slept in my room, I watched TV with my mom on the couch. We both recall this in the exact same way. The lights were off in the living room, with the TV providing the only light. We were both facing the TV when something caught our eye. We turned our heads, clearly seeing something run out of my room and across the living room into the kitchen, and then disappear. It was pale and appeared to have a faint glow, but its skin was gray and sickly looking. It was bald except for random strands of wispy hair, and it was hunched over with its arms bent, running across the living room. It was super thin, and you could clearly see its spine and rib cage. Its arms were skinny and bony. The only peculiar thing was it had horse-like legs like goat, deer, or horse legs. I don't remember if it had hooves or feet, but its legs were definitely bent oddly. It was quick, but we tracked it all the way across the living room and into the kitchen. After realizing what we saw, and realizing we both saw the same thing, the only logical explanation I could think of was that I saw my friend run from my room. Of course, there was literally no way I saw what I thought I saw. I felt no fear. I was actually very confident as I got up and walked into the kitchen. But I quickly got scared when I realized my friend wasn't anywhere in the kitchen. I could see her across the hall sleeping in my bed. I've discussed it with my mom multiple times, and we both recall it almost identically. I've never seen anything like it since then. I saw that they live in subterranean areas. It might be worth mentioning our house was on a sinkhole. I've also seen theories about them using portals, and I've always had a hunch that whatever I saw was moving between dimensions or portals, as it appeared from a hallway with no exterior doors and vanished around the kitchen corner. I was hiking with friends up in this particular canyon almost 20 years ago, maybe more. It was night, and I'm sure we were not supposed to be there after dark. We were all just young and dumb kids. It was about an hour or two hike up to this waterfall, but it was dry this particular year. We only had flashlights and lightsabers. Like I said, young and dumb. Cell phones weren't a big thing then. We got to the base of the waterfall, and we noticed a memorial with shoes tied on. They were fairly small shoes. We got up closer, and there was a laminated note with a picture of a boy in his teens, explaining he had fallen and died at that spot. It was from family and how he was dearly missed. It happened exactly 1 year on that same day. We immediately hiked back down with no rest, freaking the F out. No picture proof, but it happened. Was out hiking in a canyon at around 2:30 a.m. I could hear coyotes yipping a couple miles away, but wasn't too scared. A power transmission line runs at bottom of the canyon, and it makes a crackle sound at night when the moisture is high. I noticed a power company service van working with a cherry picker up on the line, but didn't think it was weird, probably fixing a power issue. As I got closer, I noticed the workmen were wearing what looked like motorcycle helmets that completely covered their face. They had floodlights on, and I could see the van was white with no logo. I was about 200 yards away and thought it was strange, but kept walking. I glanced over again and all three men stopped working. One had come down off the crane silently and gathered with the others together, perfectly still facing my direction. I completely froze. With those helmets on, I couldn't tell what they were looking at, but their bodies all faced me, and they weren't taking to each other. I could see their helmets were solid white and didn't have reflective shields or anything to look through. At that point, I panicked and bolted. I glanced over my shoulder and one was following me, but not actually moving, just somehow moved closer and standing still. While running, I remember thinking I never actually saw any of them move. That freaked me out and left the trail and ran off-road straight to the nearest house. I didn't look back until I was a good half-mile away. When I did look, the van was there, but the men were gone. I kept running and eventually made it home. I was a high school counselor, and years ago, I had a conversation with a student that I still think about a lot. Wondering what you all make of it. He was a good kid, not a liar, troublemaker, or anything. He wasn't mentally ill. He came into my office one day very excited because he read a library book, can't remember which one, that made him remember some experiences from childhood that he had forgotten until then. He remembered often being in the woods on his ranch in Mexico and communicating with little people like fairies or elves who lived among the flowers and plants. He proceeded to tell me that there were 3 angels standing behind me. He said the angels knew that I was worried about my adult son, and I shouldn't worry, that he was going to be fine. I had been very worried about my son, but there's no way this student would have known. Sure, he could have been crazy or making it up. But the weirdest part is that the second I had a thought in my head, he'd say, "The angel said you thought such and such." And he was correct every time. The conversation went on for a long time, and I can't explain it. He graduated soon after, and I've run into him a couple of times, but nothing else significant. Thoughts? I was at a Korean community grocery store in September 2015. I went to buy some items, and as I was approaching the counter to pay, I noticed this twitchy small woman, young in her mid-20s, I'm guessing, but she looked like she was in the DTs in need of a fix. It's a shame, really. I thought she would have been pretty if all cleaned up. Well, I still thought she was pretty. She was asking for matches, but she had no money. I made my payment and asked for matches for the lady, and it was just then at the corner of my eye, I saw a darker than dark mass just behind her but taller. I turned my head and looked directly at it. It was moving like iron filings that would shift as you moved a magnet, but not unlike an insect. Its eyes were bright like diamond white and angular like a diamond, but on the sides. Its head was also pointed, and the head and back were not unlike a planarian worm. The weird thing, as I looked down, I saw the lady's arms and legs were wrapped from behind and underneath her appendages, and the thing's body was pressed so close like a piece of clothing or blanket. That's when it moved like an insert would, like a twitch. When it moved, so did the lady. Then as I look at its face just above her head, like someone peering over someone, just not fully, it turned and looked directly at me. I have to tell you, I knew enough from experience that you do not show fear and remain calm when all you want to do is scream and point and run, which I really wanted to do. I acted like I was looking through it and looked around, not caring that I was just seen, and almost ran. The clerk handed her the matches and she thanked me, then I left. As I left, I was looking straight ahead, but internally I was concentrating behind me, wondering if it was still looking at me. All this time happened in under a minute. I began wondering what I had seen and drew it once I got home. I showed my siblings a few days later and told them what happened. They claimed it could be a possession or a jinn. I'm still not sure. But know this, I look at people now differently who are on drugs or under the influence. How they move or walk is exactly like how this creature moves. What if that is true, and part of the reason why they can't stop? You know, if you watch zombie movies like Walking Dead, they kinda move like that too. It's just a weird way they walk and shuffle. I haven't seen anything like this before nor since. Maybe you or your reader might know what the heck I saw. This occurred in Winnipeg, Manitoba, Canada. Best regards. A 17 female had a creepy encounter the night I'm writing this. My parents opened up a haunted house in my dad's shop, and we had a few actors. Names were obviously changed to their role. The actors were me, my dad, my mom, my sister, bear, ghostface, cheerleader, alien, prisoner, doll, and skeleton. I know it's a lot. Let me explain how the setup was. The shop has a store in the front, a gym in the middle, storage in the back. Dad would lead the patron into the storefront and ring the bell to let us know to get ready. Then the patron would pass Bear and Ghostface. Then they would get jump scared by cheerleader, me, and prisoner, and then pass through the rest. Alien would follow them. Simple. So when we were near the end of our time, Dad let in a guy. You know, like normal. I don't want to profile him, but he seemed to be of Arabic descent or Muslim, because he seemed to be wearing his clothes. He shall be known as Creepy Guy. I think now I should mention most of us are minors. Sister, Bear, Ghostface, and Skeleton are middle schoolers, and cheerleader, Alien, and I are high schoolers. Creepy Guy touched Bear's shoulder and almost pulled a knife on Bear and Ghostface. After he passed them, he didn't notice cheerleader, but grabbed Alien and scratched his arm. After that, he stared at prisoner and ignored me. He then started speaking in a different language. It sounded like chanting, but I don't know, towards Skeleton, doll, and sister. Mom then ran him off. We were on edge for the rest of the night. I have 3 theories. Theory 1. He was a druggie commonplace in my town. Theory 2. He was a really religious man praying over us. Theory 3. He was cursing us. I'm leaning towards 2, but it was still creepy. I am a woman who goes hiking. I was on one of my regular trails and came to a fork in the road where I continue on my usual route. I'd never felt unsafe. A man around my age was there and asked if he could go the same way as me. I say yes. We talk and everything is fine until he randomly says he could overpower me at any time. Thankfully, we were near the mouth of the trail and he didn't attempt anything. I haven't gone alone since. My sisters and I were off-roading like 2-3 hours down a forestry road in British Columbia, Canada, before we found a good spot to camp. These roads weren't on any backroads map, so it was super remote, maybe 100-120k from the nearest farm or sign on civilization. Middle of night, we were still up at the campfire when my sister said she saw a red light in the bushes that quickly disappeared. She was pretty freaked, but we just laughed thinking she was messing with us. 5 minutes later, I spot the red light in the bush behind her. It's a video recorder light. So I turn my headlamp on in the direction of the dim red light and see a man turn and run away with camera in hand. We freak the F out, jump into the truck and drove down the narrow road without any of our camping stuff. We went back in the morning to collect. It was all still there, and we surveyed a bit farther to see if there was a sort of encampment or hunting lodge. Nothing. Not even a walking path off the barely visible road. To this day, I wonder how long he followed us or what his plans with these recorded videos were for. So lone human deep in the wilderness at night is hands down the most terrifying encounter. My wife and I were hiking in Sweden and 3 or 4 days into the woods, out of the direction of population, without seeing anybody else in days. In the middle of the night, we both woke up to the sound of footsteps, boots, running, even sprinting towards our tent as clear as day. So I shot up, went outside the tent, and there was nobody there. Even searched around a bit in the pitch dark of the forest, but we were alone. This happened on March 13th, 2017. My fiance was out running errands and I was home alone with our 2 kiddos. No big deal. It's just a regular day. I'm doing the dishes. I'm all wet and soapy, and wouldn't you know it, my daughter dumps a huge ginormous bag of M&Ms. If you know how M&Ms are, they get in every little nook and cranny, like every little corner, crack and crease. Like they are just everywhere. So, here I am, all soaked and wet, and I need to start picking up these M&Ms. So I'm on my hands and knees, getting them out of every little crack I can, and putting them in a pile so I can sweep them up, and then throw them in the trash. Meanwhile, while I'm picking up these M&Ms, my phone, my house phone, starts ringing off the hook like someone keeps calling me and calling me. And I'm like, you know what, whatever, my hands are full right now, I'll get back to them. My caller ID will pick it up, and I'll be able to see who called and I can call them back. If not, they can leave a message. No big deal, right? So, I get them all in a pile, and I pick up the phone to see who called, to see if it was an emergency because they were calling non-stop. I thought it was going to be the same person calling again and again trying to get a hold of me. Well, it ended up being my grandma, my dad, and my fiance. So I saw there was a voice message. So this is where things get weird, but I don't know it yet. I don't know what's weird yet. To me, everything's normal. So I call my voicemail and I'm listening to the message. The thing about my voicemail is that it will say, message from blah blah blah, and then it says their phone number. And then it says my grandma's phone number, and then I hear my grandma's voice. So I'm listening to her message, and literally halfway through I hear my fiance's voice. And I'm like, hello? And I'm like really weirded out. We had this conversation, and in my head, I didn't even tell him that it's weird that I got randomly connected to your phone call because I was in the middle of listening to voice messages. Normally, when you take another call, you have to hit a button to go to the next line, but it automatically connected me, so I'm like, whatever, and we talk, and that's that. When I was on the phone with him, I explained to him all about tampons, took him all through what different sizes, brands, and all that. And I told him what size and brand to pick me up because I needed some tampons. So I hung up and it's fine. I didn't listen to the whole message obviously because I got cut off, and I didn't even think to call back to listen to the whole thing. I go back to doing what I'm doing. I get dinner ready and stuff, and this is when I find out the day turned into a really weird day. So my fiance comes home and he brings in some bags. I'm looking in the bags, putting stuff away, and I'm like, hey, where are those tampons I asked for? And he's like, what are you talking about? And I'm like, you know, when you called me and we had a conversation and I told you all about tampons and what kind I wanted. He was like, no. He looked at me like I was crazy. And I'm like, no, we talked. And he's like, no, we didn't, Amber. I called the house one time and you didn't answer or call me back. And I'm like, yeah, but okay, so I just dropped it because I'm already looking pretty crazy, right? So I got his cell phone and I looked through the call log and he was right. He only called me one time and I didn't answer, so it hit me. It dawns on me later in the night that, hey, you know what? I never did finish listening to that message my grandma left me. So I called the voicemail and I listened to the message and it went through my grandma's phone number that it was from her. It says her phone number and then it starts the message. Partway through her message, I heard my fiance's voice on the voicemail, and our voicemail had recorded that conversation that never happened, and it recorded his whole half of it. So when I would talk, it was just silence, but I heard his end of the conversation. The end that supposedly never happened, and I put it on speaker and let him hear it. We were pretty spooked. It's freaky. For me, this whole time, I thought it was normal, but then when he got home, now listening to it like, no, it really did happen. I'm not crazy. I didn't imagine that whole conversation. So it was like proof, In one way, it's like, yes, I'm not crazy. But in another way, it's like, well, what happened? It's creepy. Like, what could possibly happen where in my reality we had this conversation, but in his reality we didn't? It's freaky. Long story short, my dad passed away in 2019. He was a local legend of a man, a crusty, harsh, hardcore old mountain man. When he passed, he had 2 small children that he was raising on his own, as their mother had pretty much abandoned them after getting cabin fever and falling into addiction. They lived totally off-grid in an area that is snowed in for 8 months of the year. Anyways, when he died, I adopted the boys and have been raising them as my own. I'm their 48-year-old half-brother. So, that's the backstory. The kids are doing great, by the way. But I kid you not, Dad keeps visiting all these relatives and townspeople in their dreams. These are people who have no contact with one another. They always reach out to me to tell me the same thing, that Dad visited them in their dreams and had some sort of urgent message for me. They weren't sure what it was, just that he's been desperate to get to me and I won't answer. It's the same mutual dream over and over among random people who don't know one another. Honestly, I'm a little freaked out. He wasn't exactly the nicest person to me, so I'm not thrilled with the idea of him reaching out from the great beyond with a message for me. Over the years, I've come to expect these messages from random, unrelated people, and I've never told anyone about this. I had a mild stroke earlier this month, and man oh man, the old man must be desperate to get a message to me since then, because it's ramped up a lot this month. Hopefully, he's just trying to tell me to slow down and take better care of my health, because Lord knows he didn't. Well, we know how that turned out. But knowing the old man, he's probably pissed that I sold his beloved Unabomber cabin or something instead of giving up my life, moving in and raising the kids there, removed from civilization, which was his expressed desire. I'm without question that his soul is not at rest with that. His friends usually tell him in their dreams that the kids are doing great and that he can rest now, but he sure doesn't seem to want to. Went biking with a buddy in a nature preserve at night when his chain broke about 15 miles from where we started. It's pitch black except for our lighting, but nearly a full moon. We could see dozens of shapes slightly moving all around us about 20-30 yards away as we were in sort of a clearing. That wasn't the freaky part though, it was seeing the reflection of so many eyes staring at us from a distance that slowly crept towards. Luckily, I carried spare quick change chain links. I had never fixed a chain so fast in my life before or since. Me and a friend were part of a caving club about 7-8 years ago, a group of people that likes to climb around deep caves and such. We were in a really deep cave in the Austrian Alps. Can't remember the name of it. It was unpronounceable. So we've been climbing ever deeper for hours on end, and we're currently making our way across the ledge of a chasm. Imagine a very deep hole with 2 entrances at the very top. We were laying our ropes from entrance to entrance. The entire thing was maybe 20-25 meters across, so no easy thing to do. We were about halfway across, with my friend ahead of me, when suddenly there's the most creepy and subtly evil howl coming from below, from the complete darkness under us, accompanied by a blast of stale, warm air. Now, you may have been aftered, maybe even horrified, but nothing, and I say nothing in my life since that day has ever compared to the dread and sheer horror I felt while hanging on a thin wire over a hole that's God knows how deep, while we have nothing but a small lantern as a light source. We just kinda hung there for a minute, not really sure what to do, when my friend finally got his bearings and awakened me from that paralysis. We made our way across and were on our way to the deepest point, but I was still very, very shaken from that. I've researched and found that it was most likely just air that's been trapped down there for a few thousand years, and that got released when we were overhead, and the sound was the caves being caves and all, but I wasn't able to get it out of my head for months after that, and I just kinda stopped caving after that. A buddy and I went hunting when we were young, 12, 13. We had BB guns and pocket knives and thought we were cool, as we chilled quietly trying not to scare anything away, probably 40 yards behind my friend in the direction that led to the thick of the woods. I saw a very tall, completely covered in fur and upright figure running freakishly fast away from us into the woods. I screamed and ran as fast as I could home, which was about a mile at the time. I still don't know what it was, and thinking about it gives me chills. My experiences took place in the early 80s in Toronto, Canada, and just like the fellow writing of his experiences on your site, mine also took place in a very old house. The house then was at least 75 years old and has since been razed to the ground, and a brand new structure was built in its place. When my family moved in there, we experienced the same sort of events, arguments, abusive situations, and strange phenomena, but not to the point where we all noticed it right away. In fact, my younger brother was a skeptic up to the point where things began happening to him as well. I think he took this attitude to allay the fears he must have had. Our father moved out of the house after the first year and away to another part of the country, so just the three of us were left. At one point, we had family come and live with us before they too departed. My experiences began with an event I will never forget when I was 16. It was summer and I had difficulty sleeping. This went on for 1 month approximately. Then one night I had fallen into a light sleep when I was violently awakened. I recall hearing a sound that I thought was an explosion and thinking that our stove must have exploded in the kitchen below me. I opened my eyes and looked around the room in the darkness, but saw nothing to indicate anything was happening. Suddenly my bed began to shake violently up and down, and it felt as though I was being electrocuted through my solar plexus. I couldn't move, but I could see my feet moving as the bed was jumping up and down. Some objects rose up off my dresser and shot towards the bed. I thought they would hit me as they approached with such speed. In fact, they stopped suddenly and began to swirl around in a counterclockwise direction above me, and from the center of this swirl, a bright white light appeared, and some voices which were like high-pitched shrieks or nails on a blackboard said quite clearly, "The message we bring is to tell the people he is still alive." And then everything stopped suddenly. I was terrified and basically thought I would end up in a nut house. I remember shaking from fear so much I could barely get out of bed. I made my way to my mom's room to tell her about it, at which point she assured me I was having nightmares. "Say your prayers and go back to sleep," she said. I returned to my room after an hour or more, but I couldn't sleep. It was a long time before I could sleep there, in fact. The next event happened the following January. I was coming home very late one night and decided to take the shortcut through the alleyway by our street. I passed a parked van with windows all around, and I saw a movement in the van which made me feel somehow by its shape, size, and response that it was a Doberman someone had left outside in their van. I kept walking, but the thought pestered me that someone should leave their dog out in midwinter in the night. So I went back to the van cautiously peering in, but there was nothing at all. Not even a cushion or anything hanging from the ceiling. Okay, I thought, I guess I imagined it. I happily kept walking home, and when I was in the alley, I suddenly heard footsteps behind me in the snow. I got a little freaked out, and when I turned my head, I didn't see anyone there. As I got to the end of the alleyway and turned onto my street, I looked back to the entrance to see if anyone was following me. What I saw shocked and terrified me. There was a street light right at the corner, and in the pool of its light was standing this enormous creature. It was at least 8 feet tall and huge. What struck me was that its form was completely black. There were no reflective surfaces on it whatsoever. In fact, the light was shining directly on it, and it seemed to absorb that light. It had large things on its head, which I took to be horns or ears, and its fingers ended in points like claws, and the feet as well. Its eyes were red completely and staring right at me. I don't think my feet touched the ground, I ran so fast. After that experience, I had a few others with the same creature. Another night I came home late again, and I fell onto my bed after shutting the door, just wanting to fall asleep. My cat was in the bed with me when we both heard a voice laughing in the room. A masculine voice. My cat freaked out and ran to the door, scratching and meowing loudly to get out. I opened the door and she took off. I just didn't want to believe anything was in there with me, so I pointedly turned my back to the rest of the room and went to sleep. Another night I turned over and opened my eyes early in the morning, and there was the same creature, smaller though, standing in front of my closet staring at me. I recall I got really mad and told it to EFF off and turned around and went back to sleep. Meanwhile, my brother had seen the exact same creature, but he had yellow eyes. He confided the story to me years later when we had left the house and had no knowledge of my experiences. He told me he had awakened early one morning and found that he had left the light on in his room. Thinking that he should get up and turn it off, he turned onto his back and opened his eyes, and there sitting on his bed's headboard was the same creature. Talons on feet and hands, completely black with no reflective surfaces. But his was, he said, about 4 feet tall and squatting on the headboard staring at him with yellow eyes. He said he was terrified and decided not to turn off the light after all. I don't remember if he said it vanished quickly or if he shut his eyes, and when he opened them it was gone. He said he never saw it again, but had other strange experiences in that house. One day we decided that we should trade rooms, so I moved all my stuff out to his room and vice versa. I teased him and said he'd have to share my room with a visitor, but he was disbelieving. After I had moved to his room, I had my last experience in that house that was in the shadow people realm. I woke up one night to a sound in my room like rustling. I was wide awake because I thought it might be a mouse. I switched on my lamp and looked toward the other end of the room, but seeing and hearing nothing, I lay down again with the light still on. I turned to look at the clock and saw that it was 2:20 a.m. Then I saw these 2 large globes of light beyond my nightstand. I was frozen up on one elbow because I had been about to turn out my light again. They moved in a way that reminded me of balloons falling. The larger of the 2 was golden yellow in color, and the smaller was blue. They looked like spheres lit from within and emanating a misty light from their forms. I somehow could sense that they were intelligent. They knew that I was looking at them, and they wanted me to see. The larger golden one floated almost majestically to the door, whereupon it flattened to a pancake shape in under half a second and slipped under the door. The second smaller one followed along and did the same. I was very nervous and scared at that point, but only because I had to go to the bathroom, and this meant I had to go out into the hallway where they had vanished to. Our hallway was very dark and without a proper light, as the house was old and not renovated very well. I waited for as long as I could, which was about 15 minutes, and then I cautiously opened my door and went. The hallway was pitch black, so my plan was to inch my way to the bathroom with my back to the wall, so nothing could sneak up on me, and once I got there I could turn on the bathroom light to illuminate the hallway. I followed my plan through, and as it turned out, when I turned on the bathroom light, it shone down onto the stairs and the first landing. In the light were 2 shadow people. I've only ever thought of them that way because there was no other way to describe them. They looked like shadows, only they were in the light. They didn't look like the other creatures I had seen, in fact. They looked like people in the sense that they had a head and arms and legs and torso and hands. They threw up their hands as though in surprise, like I'd caught them unexpectedly, and then they flew down the stairs without a sound. It took me a long time to come out of that bathroom, as I didn't want to encounter any of these things again. Unlike your other poster, these creatures never touched me, at least to my knowledge, and never tried to hurt me. Although they did scare the dickens out of me. I recall telling these stories to people years later in other parts of the world, hearing similar tales and wondering just what they could be. Somehow we don't seem that much closer to knowing. I would conjecture, though, that as is the case with plant and insect life, here we certainly haven't got all the facts in yet. Perhaps these creatures share the world we live in but differently, and we have learned to ignore them or pretend they don't exist. Maybe they are trying to tell us they do exist. Perhaps like us, there are those with good intentions and those with not so good intentions. It's my opinion that we are getting closer to the truth every day. As a side note here, I read a book a year ago called Initiation by Elizabeth H., in which she distinctly mentions the shadow people and the effects they caused on the lives of people she knew, including her own son before World War II. If this is true, then perhaps these are beings who've been with us for a very long time. Then again, if they are time travelers, all things are possible. Myself, along with 4 other guys, decided to park on Anthony Road and walk out to the middle of a field to have some beer. We lived in a small town with not much to do. Keep in mind, however, that we hadn't yet started drinking, and even if we had, I don't think it would have caused a group hallucination. The reason we had guns was due to an incident prior to this, where my female cousin and her friends, who were all about 5 years younger than us, came back to my aunt's house one night very scared. They said that they were driving down Anthony RD when a guy was lying in the middle of the road. They had to stop the car since it's a narrow road, so they couldn't turn around. They put the car in reverse to back up, and just then, the guy in the road jumped up and started chasing the car. People came out of the cornfields trying to open the car doors and stop the car. They took off in drive, came back to the house, and told us what happened. Hence, the presence of guns the night of our encounter. The night we had our encounter was very bright. There was a full moon, or near full, shining down on some pretty thick fog that was about shin high, so visibility was quite high. We drove up and down the road once, just to make sure no cops were parked anywhere, and then we spotted the field we wanted to go into. It was really cool looking with the fog lying heavy on the ground, and the moon bouncing off of it, giving a really cool glow effect. We parked 2 cars and began to venture into the field at the area where tractors would enter. We walked about 20 or 30 yards in and stopped to listen for cars, and to make sure no one else was around. One of us noticed something large and dark along the woodline to our right, about 150 yards out into the field. We all stopped talking and watched it for a few minutes, trying to determine what it was: a tree stump, large rock, bush, etc. After a few minutes, we decided it was just a big bush and stopped paying attention to it, walking further into the field. After going into the field a little more, one of us noticed the object wasn't there where we had seen it before. We began to scan the area to see where it went, and then we noticed something running from right to left across the field in front of us. It looked to be about 3 feet above the fog line, if not 4 feet. That would make it bigger than any dog. The way it ran reminded me of a cheetah or greyhound dog, reaching out with long forelimbs to grab the ground, and then hurling its hind haunches under itself to spring forward again. Its silhouette looked like a wild boar or hyena, with the stereotypical large hump on its upper back. It ran really fast to the center of the field, and then turned directly towards us. I've never seen anything able to change direction as fast as this thing did, especially considering how fast it was traveling. At first, we thought it had stopped running, but then after a second, we were able to tell it was now coming straight at us. We were all asking and commenting with each other, trying to reason what it was: dog, cougar, bear, etc. As it continued its charge, we raised our guns at it. I had a shotgun, and 2 of the other guys had pistols. When we raised our guns, it began to zigzag. I remember thinking that it knew what guns were. I remember saying, or one of us said, "That thing knows we are pointing guns at it." I think that's when we got creeped out enough to run for the cars. My buddy, the Facebook guy, said he didn't shoot because he couldn't identify the target. I personally, and am not ashamed to say, think it's because we all got scared, realizing it wasn't any known animal. It was moving so fast that I thought if I missed, or if my first shot didn't stop it, I wouldn't get a second shot. Shotguns are only effective within certain distances, and I didn't want it getting too close to me. As we were running away, my friend at the time fell into a groundhog hole, so I had to run back and help him up so we could get to the cars. Given how fast it was running, I don't think it was really trying to catch us, or it would have. When we got to the cars and took off, I recall looking out the side window, and this thing was chasing the cars. Once we got over the little bridge on Anthony onto Manning Road, we were able to get up more speed. I don't think it ever came out of the field or crossed the bridge though. It was as if it just wanted to chase us off. It never stood up on two legs, and I didn't notice any eye shine. I think it may have been too far away when it started its charge to see the eyes. I can tell you that it was bigger than any dog and much, much faster. It was able to zigzag really fast like a rabbit. It was very jerky in its side-to-side movement, almost twitchy, I'd say. I got the feeling that it was so quick and agile that I might not be able to get a bead on it to get good hits on it with the shotgun. When we were pulling away in the car is probably when I got the best look at it. It had odd body mechanics as it ran. It reminded me of a cheetah, and I could tell the forelimbs were longer than the hind limbs. I couldn't see a tail or the shape of the ears, however. Relevant background info. I have always loved to dance. When I was 9, we moved into a bungalow. My new bedroom had a big, wide window that took up roughly half of the wall, and for some reason I didn't have any curtains. But weird in hindsight, but it suited me just fine because at night this window would serve as the perfect mirror for me to watch myself dance, and I would just pretend I was in my own studio. The window faced into the backyard, which was loosely fenced, shitty old fence that provided little privacy. But single mom who worked a lot and barely getting by as it is equal sign replacing fence not major priority. One summer, I had just got back from visiting family in Europe. I was 12. My mom and brother had also been on the trip, but had returned home about a month earlier. I go in my room and notice that my mom has hung curtains. It struck me as odd even then because my mom was not the type to spontaneously do nice things for me. But I just assumed she had missed me and wanted to make my room cozier for when I got back something. I forgot about it until about a week later when I bring up the curtains. Before my mom can say anything, my younger brother goes, "You haven't told her." Told me what? Well, apparently while I was away, my mom and brother were just hanging out in the living room, which is beside the front door, one night, when suddenly my dog started barking like there was someone at the door. It was past midnight, so my mom was understandably freaked out, especially being there alone with a 10-year-old. Anyway, there is no knock at the door, but my dog is still losing it, so they turn out the lights to try and see if there's something outside. They see two people walking around the front yard with flashlights, turning the corner into the backyard. So my mom opens the door just wide enough to let the dog out to investigate. Someone starts yelling to get the damn dog under control, and they realize it's two police officers. My mom gets the dog under control and asks them what's going on. They tell her that they are responding to a call reporting a man seen sitting in a tree on the southwest corner of our backyard, staring into a window. You can probably guess which window. Anyway, I didn't sleep in my room for a month after that, and couldn't think about it without feeling on the verge of a panic attack for years. Since then, I am always very, very vocal about people having curtains. You may not suspect it, but you never know who could be watching you from the dark. Didn't see anything but heard. I lived in rural Massachusetts. To anyone who's familiar, that means miles of woodland with spaced out suburban areas in between. I was walking down my grandfather's logging trail, getting ready for his funeral. I'm also an avid mushroom collector, so I'm always walking slowly and staring at the ground. Friends hate me, basically. So I get to this cool little white Captain Mushroom and stop to take a close-up picture of it, and that's when I heard it. The best way I can describe it is as if somebody with a lot of flesh on his knuckles were punching a tree. Now I know what a deer sounds like when they stomp to protect their children and are smashing their antlers on trees. I've heard bear, fisher, cat, moose, pretty much any animal in western Massachusetts that exists, so naturally I looked up and freaked the hell out. It was so rhythmic, thud, 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 and it went on for minutes at the same pace. So being the curious person that I am, I let out a whistle that couldn't be mistaken for a bird. Right after my whistle, I hear a low, quick whistle back. My first thought is, oh, it must be some logger scooping the land past the no trespassing gate. Ignorant, I know. So I yell out, hello, pretty much as loudly as I could. Then whatever it was ran away faster than I've ever heard a human being run. Using my experience with deer, dogs, moose, and bear, I just assessed that it could have possibly rationalized it being a four-legged creature. I know what they sound like running, and this was much closer to a two-legged creature. I'm 100% positive on that. What doesn't make sense, however, is that the two-legged creature that ran away from me faster than any two-legged creature I have ever heard before also sounded like it was at a minimum 250 pounds. The steps were loud and very frantic. A lot of people believe Bigfoot has a spiritual connection to the forest it remains in, and thus the creatures in it as well. I do not find it a coincidence that this happened the day of my grandfather's funeral. I ran all the way home and I have never looked back. Okay, so I have this story that happened to me and my friends. To set the scene, we were on a Boy Scout camping shooting trip. There were 20 to 30 of us. We were in a little cabin thing with windows on the front and back and a front and back door. There were wooden tables all around the area. The adult cabin was about 1/8 of a mile down a gravel road. In the dark, there was obviously a buddy system because it's Boy Scouts. So it's around midnight, and everyone had been telling scary stories, just like a normal camping trip. Well, I had to go to the bathroom and asked my friend to come along. He said sure, and he got our knives. We knew that there were bears in the woods, and it made us feel safer. We went to the bathroom and began our walk back. This is where it got scary. I felt an instinctual fear. I looked to my friend, and he had the same look as me. We began to walk just a little bit faster and unfold our pocket knives. I then turned around and saw it. It looked similar to a cat, but it was roughly 6 feet tall and was on its hind legs, kind of hunched over. I freaked the hell out and started running. My friend saw it too. When we sprinted back to the cabin, it began making a moaning, howling noise and followed us very closely. We pounded on the door and the guys let us in. We told them what we saw and they actually believed us. So we locked the front door and looked at the back door. It had no lock. We pushed a table up against it and had a kid there with his knife for safety. We drew the blinds on all the windows that had them. One of them didn't, and we sat there with all the lights on. Then we saw the eyes outside of the windows without blinds. We were all ourselves, and the thing slowly walked to the back door. We heard it bumping up against it, maybe trying to open it. We thought it then left, but we still thought we were going to die. No one slept that night, and when the adults came to wake us up, we told them. They just laughed and said we were making it up. We know it happened, even if they didn't believe us. Not me.
Thanks for listening. Hope you already fallen asleep. See you tomorrow at the same time.